Hey everyone, it's Denise Brown from the Caregiving Years Training Academy. Thanks so much for being here today. We're going to talk about the stuffed calendar. I've got two family caregivers who are going to join me in just a few moments to share their experiences. And for those of you who are joining us live, we also encourage you to share any questions or experiences in our chat room. We'd love to hear your experiences and what insights are coming to you as a result of our conversation today. I wanted to start with an overview of some idea of what the stuffed calendar looks like during a caregiving experience. There was an article in the Washington Post last month, and I'll include a link in our chat room before we close today, that talked about treatment burden. It was specific to older adults who are on Medicare, but I think we can all understand what treatment burden is. And this is what they describe as causes treatment burden. It's this idea that we have to arrange appointments, provide transportation, we have to pick up medications, have medications delivered, pay attention to refills. We have to communicate with insurance companies, and that's a nightmare. And then we have to track bills, and we have to compare what we owe versus what someone else says we owe versus what we think the insurance company owes. So it's not just, oh, I'll just write out a check. Oh, I'll just give credit card information. It is reconciling all the different bills that you get. And then you get treatment plans for a family member. And it's not only just receiving the treatment plan, but it's implementing, managing, and adjusting. You know best which pieces of a treatment plan are working for your caree. So you're going to follow up with physicians and specialists and practitioners when there needs to be an adjustment. And then you're going to pay attention to that adjustment and so on. And then it repeats, right? So this is not just once a year, this is ongoing. The other part about the article I thought was really interesting spoke to how great it is that we have specialists for all kinds of conditions and diagnoses. And it also adds to the number of appointments that we're responsible for managing. I was able to track down some stats. The only stats that I really could find were related to Medicare patients, and I think it's because it's much easier to track that payer and that data for that payer. So individuals who are on Medicare typically spend about 3 weeks with medical tests and procedures in the emergency room and in a hospital or a skilled nursing facility, 3 weeks. In addition, we feel what this is like to manage all this. We are coordinating care among a variety of providers, clinicians, specialists, general practitioners. In the Caregiving in the USA 2000 survey, which is the most recent that AARP and National Alliance for Caregiving have created, the stat around what it's like for us and our stress is 31% report having some difficulty coordinating care. Now, this would have been from data collected 4 years ago. And I would say that that represents what life was like 4 years ago, and life is very different right now. And I would imagine that that figure is much, much higher. It's very difficult to coordinate care. Okay. I want to mention, though, that I do see some hope for us. In 2024, Medicare added reimbursement for 2 new services: community health integration and principal illness navigation. Trained auxiliary personnel can receive a referral from a physician to support family caregivers and patients with these 2 service codes. What's interesting is that commercial payers can now start to use these billing codes and cover these services. I do not think a commercial payer has yet announced that they're adding in these services, but I believe it will come because the cost to the system is going to be so great that there has to be some solution. We think about the cost to us, but there's a cost to the systems too, because it's so fragmented. It's so much duplication. It's so much back and forth. It's so much tracking that even a physician, for instance, feels this treatment burden. If you think about your general practitioner making referrals and then keeping in touch with specialists that have been made a referral, and then keeping up to date with patients and the referrals to the specialists, that could be an entire appointment. Instead, a physician can refer to a trained auxiliary personnel, and typically they think of it as a community health worker. It could be a certified caregiving consultant, for instance, because our training is comparable to community health worker training. And then those individuals meet with patients and family caregivers to figure this out, to help them. So let's say you are a family caregiver having a terrible time trying to figure out, how do I organize all these appointments? How do I figure out who does what when? The physician can say, oh my gosh, this is causing you so much stress. We need to help. And then they make a referral, and then community health integration services are provided for you. Community health integration services also include the opportunity for the patient to tell their life story. Isn't that interesting? So community health integration services include care coordination, health education, patient self-advocacy. So how do we actually advocate for ourselves within doctor's appointments, hospitalizations, treatments, health system navigation, and social emotional support. These services can be provided to the patient, and if a patient's diagnosis prevents them from participating in these services, the family caregiver can receive them on behalf of the patient, and then the clinician bills the Medicare recipient for those services, even though it's the family caregiver who is not a Medicare recipient receives those services. And then principal illness navigation is really to help manage potential risks. And if a patient has these risks, then they can receive care management services. And again, these are services provided by a community health worker under the guidance and supervision of a clinician and billed to Medicare. Isn't that amazing? I mean, when that came out, I thought, I am dreaming. I have been to every conference I can think of that has talked about these new reimbursement codes. I have talked to every colleague I could think of. I have read, I have studied, I have questioned, I have doubted, and what I presented is the truth. Okay, so there's hope for us. I also want to mention that AI can be helpful too. I have started using AI very intentionally within the past week or so. I have included AI assignments in all of our training programs. And then I thought, well, I should probably start using it too. And I have found it to be incredibly helpful. And the AI tool that I have found that I like the most is called Claude.ai, CLAUDE.ai. You could ask Claude anything. You could say, Claude, I can't figure out how to schedule all these appointments. Here's the availability with each practitioner and specialist. Help me. And then Claude could help you figure it out. In addition, Claude can help you prepare for appointments with specialists, can help you think through the pros and cons of treatment decisions. So that can be helpful. So between Medicare reimbursement for support services and AI, I do think that there's some hope on the horizon. But let's talk about the reality of our situations. So joining me today are two family caregivers, Barbara and Jaclyn. And I'm going to have each introduce themselves with an introduction about personal and professional caregiving experiences. And Barbara, let's start with you. I'm going to close out my screen. There we go. Barbara, let's start with you.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Barbara Corley. I am an active family caregiver for two family members. So I have a sister who is about a little shy of 4 years younger than me, who has developmental disabilities. She requires 24-hour care / supervision. She lives with my parents. My dad will soon be 80. My mom is 77. I'm the only other sibling. So I play an active role, because when my parents are no longer able to take care of her, I will step into that role full time. So as part of that role, my sister is on a Medicaid waiver program here in the state of Ohio. And I have been a care provider, or paid, they call them direct support professional, since 1990 with her. So I am able to provide services to her and bill Ohio Medicaid, or our Department of Developmental Disabilities, a subset of Medicaid, to receive reimbursement for that care. If I were not able to do it, we would have to find, someone outside the family to do that, or help.
I think Barbara froze up for a
So
second.
typically
we go.
Monday,
There we
Wednesday,
go.
Friday.
I think you froze up for a minute, Barbara.
Oh, did I? I'm sorry.
That's okay.
That's rural internet, I'm not sure where I cut out, but I go there 3 full days a week, and yeah, to offset, give my parents a break, that type thing. In addition to that, my husband is a military veteran, and he is dealing with some substantial physical limitations, traumatic brain injury, post-traumatic. So yeah, I've just in the past probably 2 years started being more involved in the appointments and such with my sister. That's always been my mom and dad. I've been physically very involved with my husband's appointments. So driving him to the appointments with the VA, and then what have you, all the community care type referrals we get from the VA to the private sector. So on top of that, I run a small business. So I am helping people in my county get certified to become providers with that same Medicaid program that I work with. So we have family members, non-family caregivers that I help get certified with the Medicaid program. So I'm juggling all of that, all three of those elements basically at the same time, plus carrying the load of things to do here at the house, which my husband's, due to his limitations, are really unable to assist with much. So.
Okay. Thanks, Barbara. Jaclyn, would love to have you introduce yourself.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me. I'll apologize about the sunglasses. I was in a bit of an accident this week and I look terrible, so that's why I'm wearing them. This is much more pleasant than what you can't see. But I'm fine. So where do I start? I was a tax accountant. That was what I went to school for. I was in that profession for about 13 years, and when my middle son was born, he was diagnosed with multiple severe disabilities because I caught a virus when I was pregnant. I did continue working for a while and got his services taken care of, but had 3 kids close in age and eventually resigned to support them. And in those 6 years when I was home, I dealt with so many issues with lack of accessibility, lack of inclusion, just trying to manage everything that I was managing for him, and feeling like I was living 2 different worlds, managing his needs and my other 2 children. That I took a writing class in 2020 and just really fell into writing and sharing my story. So in the past 4 years, I've been published in over 20 mainstream magazines and newspapers about all different topics related to caregiving, inclusion, accessibility, disability, and just trying to make my small dent in changing the world. And as far as Medicaid, I actually did finally apply this year. And apparently we had a few nurses come, and at this point there are none. So I'm in the process of applying to get paid myself, and I think I'm 2 weeks into having hired someone to do laundry and other sorts of things in the house, which feels amazing. because I have not had help in the past 14 years. So yeah, it's a tricky balancing act for sure.
It's always such a big topic. I'm always like, where do I start? So I guess what I'll start with is for both of you, when does all the scheduling and managing the appointments and managing the care needs really start to get to you?
I would say for me, it's when it feels like, I don't know, everything rises up at the same time and it's all happening at the same time. It feels like a fire hose. Um, when work things pile up and, all these little decisions have to be made and appointments got to be moved and new appointments are coming in. And I think it just feels like too much information at one time. That's personally when I feel the overwhelm the most.
Jaclyn, how about for you?
Yeah, I agree. I think there have been some weeks over the years where it just somehow all accumulates into one week, and I don't know how or why that seems to happen. Uh,
Yeah.
and it's those weeks that I feel like I'm just drowning and need to take a step away. I wrote an article for the Mighty a while ago about, it was like a day in the life, and it was one of those days. It was just one of those days where I got up and I went to try to knock out multiple doctors and get blood drawn and coordinate everything all at the same time so I could do it all succinctly, but it just wasn't working the way that I needed it to. And usually those are the times when I really need to I try and follow up with taking a step back, because will really get to me. And then I'm not able to do what I should as a parent when I feel like that. So I really try to take a step back if I can. There have been many times when I just haven't been able to. But I do. It's funny how those weeks just accumulate. And even now, sometimes I'll try to consolidate everything into a week when my son is off from school. There are a couple of weeks over the summer I think, okay, well, I'll schedule all of these medical appointments then. And then I don't realize what that does to me mentally and physically, because I'm trying to, okay, I'll just do it all at the same time. But then that's a lot too. So it is really difficult to figure out how and when to make all of that work out.
Jaclyn, I'm
I totally
curious.
agree with that.
Oh, go ahead, Barbara. Go ahead,
Oh, I
Barbara.
was just going to say, we live in a rural, so all of our stuff is in the big city, if you will, and that's 45 minutes away. So when we go, I'm like, I strategize. If we're going to be there, what else do we need to do around there? And then it's just crazy. You're right. It's like the universe rises up and just plugs in a bunch more stuff, and it's an intense week.
And I'm curious for both of you, when you have that intense week, Jaclyn, you were talking a little bit about how that feels. I'm curious what emotions that you're feeling during those really intense weeks.
I find that I'm just more on edge, and my personality just be short with anybody else
Yeah.
that talks to me about anything, because I feel so stretched. So I try to really tune into my body to realize when I'm feeling like that. If I notice that if I get frustrated with several people, it's probably not them, it's probably me. So I try to do the best that I can to take a step back, and if I can punt to my husband. It's not always possible, but if I can, I do, and try to balance that. I know there are certain appointments that also trigger me more than others, so I'll do the same thing. There are certain doctor's appointments or even offices that I have a lot of PTSD just from my son's birth, and the experience with him. It was just very sudden, and there was a lot of guilt associated with it. So there are certain places and smells. Even I know there's one building near the hospital that if I take him, I try not to use the restroom because the smell of the soap will trigger me. So there are
Oh.
certain places and certain things that I try to avoid. And if my husband's able to take my son to that appointment, then I gladly let him, and I fill in with other things. It's not always possible because we're both working and have our responsibilities, but I do try to stay tuned into what those triggers are and avoid them so that I don't spiral, because right? If I'm here and then I dip, then it's harder to recover. So I try to just stay here and punt off the things that I can. I don't know. I know we're talking about how to make this easier. Some things since the pandemic, like virtual calls. Like my son sees the neurologist every quarter. He has not been back in the office since COVID. And I love it because I'll have a 5-minute phone call with the neurologist and, here he is and I have a conversation and that's the end of it. And I don't have to drag him half an hour to the office and pick him up from school and drop him off and go through the whole rigmarole of checking in and waiting in the waiting room and going in and doing all of the intro stuff again. It's just she knows me, she calls, and I can just check that off my list. And so I love when a doctor is able to do that with insurance and willing to.
Jaclyn, your insights about the PTSD are really powerful. And I wondered when you understood what was happening to your body because of what you were interacting with.
I started therapy right when my son was born. So my husband and I went right away together and talked about just learning how, even in the very beginning, he was able to listen to things that the doctors said when I couldn't, right? I'm not very auditory, and my emotions were so high that I couldn't take in anything the doctors were saying. My husband was able to do that. So he would take it in, I would do the best I could, but then look things up later or try to process later. I process things more slowly than he might. And then even at night or on the weekends, sometimes I would want to talk about things and he just couldn't because his head wasn't there, his emotions weren't there. So we had to really learn how to balance those strong emotions early on. And so even after the 10 years of therapy, the writing helped me too, because I'm just much more tuned into, okay, what is hard about this? What was the challenge? Why was this difficult for me? Why was this painful for me? How can I do this better going forward? Because I'm a mother and I'm trying to set an example for 3 children and balance everything that they need. So I really try to stay tuned in to make sure that they all individually have what they need. And I can only do that if I know where I'm at. So it's always been very important to me since my son was born to try and stay ahead of that.
It's so powerful. And I'm curious, Barbara, when you hear Jaclyn talk about her own PTSD, you live with someone who has PTSD. And I'm wondering if you see it in yourself as well.
I'll be honest, I probably don't take the time to even assess. I'm I'm an action person. I'm forward thinking, which I'm working to kind of break that loop. I'm trying to be more self-aware, to be honest. I mean, we've been through a lot in terms of diagnoses and cancer and scary stuff in our 20 years of marriage as of yesterday. So I'm sure I do. I'm sure I carry stuff from my sister. I'm sure that my little idiosyncrasies or isms, as I call it, I'm sure they are related to that. But I honestly just have never, I don't know. I just put my head down, barrel through. I do self-care in terms of keeping me here in the moment and moving forward. But I have never really taken the time to really self-reflect. I've never taken the time to do therapy, to be honest. I've never made the time. I never felt like I've had the time to do it. I feel functional. So, I just keep moving. I'm blown away at what Jaclyn's managed and, how she's come through the other side. I mean, yeah, it's not perfect by any means, but wow, to take something like that and turn it into something, it's just, wow, what it's become is just amazing. I'm speechless just listening to your story.
There was something you both alluded to, and that is there are some appointments that take more out of you than others. Jaclyn, I know that PTSD is part of that. I'm just wondering, from a practical standpoint, which offices are like a nightmare for you, just in terms of the logistics of navigating like the hallways or the parking garage or whatever it is that you have to manage. So Jaclyn, I can see you nodding your head. Tell us about that.
Just which ones are harder for me and which ones, yeah. So the ones that are across from the hospital where my son was born are typically harder for me. I think just the association. It also depends on the office staff, the bedside manner of the doctor, how the nurses handle things. So I will very easily get triggered. Honestly, if I get triggered, it just means I come home and write something else. So then it's more bylines for me. But I try to see it that way now. But I will go, for example, my son sees the gastroenterologist every quarter. He has Crohn's disease on top of everything else. And I don't love The Office because I don't know what it, for some reason kids will stare more in that. It's a pediatric building, so there'll be more staring. There's one nurse there that I know that I love, and I even asked them to assign her to me if I ever happen to be there. And I've said something to her because we have a good rapport. She's friendly. She knows us. She knows my son. She talks to my son, not about my son. And she just kind of knows how to manage everything. Where others, I'll go in and it's very formal. It's almost like they know nothing, and I have to go backwards and go down everything all over again. And how do we weigh him? And how do we do this? And it just, that will set me off. It will make me angry. So then by the time I get in to see the doctor, as much as I like the doctor, I'm already triggered and I'm already upset. So it's, I really do try. I think one time I went to the same office for have blood drawn for him, and I saw the nurse that I liked, and I will just try to reestablish that connection again. Oh, hey, I'm here for blood. Hey, it's almost like, is there anything you can do to kind of make my life a little bit easier? Because you know me, and you know that this is one of a million things on my list. At this point, if this is helpful for anyone, we have a phlebotomist that comes to the house. So to me, that's worth the, I pay a little bit extra for her to come to the house and do the blood draw before he goes to school. We have to do it quarterly, and I don't have to think at all. She just comes in, knows exactly how to, he's thin and it's hard to get the blood for him. So she actually pricks his foot, and it's easy peasy. I don't have to pull him out of school or do anything complicated or deal with 3 phlebotomists that don't know how to find his vein that works. And so I've learned to really speak up when a situation is just not good. I've gone through 5 neurologists, 4 orthopedic surgeons. If I walk into an office and I'm really stressed out about how it's being managed, unfortunately, the front end matters as much as the doctor. It really makes a difference when I go somewhere if they're not organized or I have to repeat things over and over. And I'll stop talking for a minute now, but I do have another story about how I managed something else with my mental health and constant questions.
Keep going. I don't want you to lose it. Keep going.
So for an example, my son he gets a bus to school, and it took us years to find the appropriate transportation, like just really inappropriate people handling him. I'll leave it at that, to get him to school. I drove him for a while, and he's out of district. He's 20 minutes away. So they basically bid out to the lowest transportation company to pick him up. So I have a good transportation company now and a good bus. And so the nurse that comes for the bus is coordinated by an agency, and the person at the agency has to call every 2 months and make sure everything is the same, right? Nothing's going to change with my son, right? So this woman will call me out of the blue when I'm on a phone, wherever I am. I'm working, I'm with my kids, something, and say hello, and he'll start all the way at the beginning. Is this the same? Is this the same? Is this the same? Right? Every time it triggers me. So I used to get really kind of grumpy at him. So I finally said to him, why? Why do you have to ask me this every time? Well, we're accredited by such and such company. I said, thank you. I Googled the company. I called them. I told them, you are screwing up with my mental health. I cannot repeat these questions every 2 weeks. Now I get an email, and all I have to write back is no change.
Brilliant. Brilliant. I would say the repetition and duplication within the systems is, it makes me want to cry right now, just even thinking about it. It is such a horrible experience. And something that's really interesting about our conversation is we think about quality of life for our caree, ourselves, and our family as being something like within our house, but there's never really any kind of question or discussion around quality of life within the buildings of the system that we go to. And quality of life includes the personnel we interact with, the processes we have to put up with, the instructions we have to give over and over and over, and just how uncooperative sometimes those systems are with us. Barbara, I wonder what change you would love to see, either in scheduling or completing appointments for your sister or your husband, that would make life easier for all of you.
I mean, it kind of, speaking to Jaclyn's point, we've had circumstances where we didn't end up in the best of facilities, and we advocated and moved. With my sister, and specifically, it's really hard to find good dental care. She's nonverbal, she's spastic quad, or spastic quadriplegic, sorry, visually impaired, all these type things. And we were blessed to actually, I work from good people. I think if you find a good, solid medical professional and you need additional help, you work from that person. I believe good people know good people. So I was able to work, like in the case of, we'd never been able to get a mammogram for her. And I worked from my OBGYN. And I said, here's the deal. We need to get a mammogram because my mom had breast cancer. And he connected us to a facility where they give us 2 technicians, because she's not going to hold still. She doesn't understand. It hurts. She wants to move away. I get it. We've been very lucky in that we advocate. And if I have to, I'm like you, Jaclyn, if I have to change a doctor 3 times, I'm going to do it. We've had some rough spots, but we've always seemed to come through that somehow. We're very blessed with a very good healthcare system when physicians where we are, and we kind of sit and marvel in that at this point. They're very cooperative to the best of their ability. I mean, a lot of it just has to do with, like I have to compartmentalize my world, so I need my sister's appointments to be on Monday, Wednesday, or Friday. I need my husband's to be on Tuesday or Thursday. And then I work stuff and everything else around that. And in our experiences, within the best of their ability, outside of his oncology appointments, they're very accommodating. I think a big part of that, though, is, when you walk up to the counter, they might say to you, okay, the next appointment is, Monday, such and such. We have to set that boundary and say, no, if I can't do Monday, if Mondays aren't good for me, I will tell them they're not good for me. I will advocate for myself as the caregiver and what I know works in my overall world and speak. Because for the longest time, I would make myself crazy, not saying, I can't do Mondays. I would just take it and just move on and then freak out and figure out how I'm going to make this work. Whereas all we have to do is just step up and say, well, can you do a Tuesday and Thursday? Those are better for me. And generally, just by saying that, people are, oh, well, yeah, let me see what I can do. I think people are inherently good-hearted and they want to help within their parameter of being able to. But a lot of that too is we just have to say, we have to speak up for ourselves and what our needs are and what works best, because we are juggling a lot.
Something that you talked about, Jaclyn, was having as many appointments or procedures done or tests at home, for instance, so drawing blood. We did that with my dad as much as we could. And sometimes I wondered, was this really worth it? Because they would give a window, and my dad lived in an independent retirement community and loved the meals. So the window always included a mealtime. And he would say to me, what do I do? It's over lunch. Do I wait in my apartment? I would say, no, go to lunch. When the technician checks in, the staff should be able to direct that technician to wherever you are. Sometimes that worked, sometimes it didn't. But then he would have this window, and in his head, he would be like, well, this is when they'll come. And they would always show up outside the window. And then they would say to him, you're my last appointment tonight. So it would be like at 6:30 at night. I started working at 6 a.m. And so then it would stress him out that he had these technicians who would come, who had been working 12-hour days. And then he would be like, oh my gosh, what is going on here? And I just wonder, Jaclyn, when you've had a really good experience with the technician that's coming for blood draws. But you talked earlier that you hadn't had a really great experience trying to find a nurse through a Medicaid waiver program. And I'm curious about appointment times when they are coming to your home and how you've been able to manage those so that they are as successful as possible.
I think that the woman that we have I don't know if she's a standalone, but she says she's coming at 7:30 and she comes at 7:30. Yeah, so she just, because I'll have her come before he goes to school. A friend gave me her information, and so same like what you were saying, Barbara, finding people through the network, I feel like also is and speaking to, you were talking about dentists before, I got us kicked out of two dentists. So one I got mad at because they wouldn't see my son a week after he had a seizure, which was against the law. And when I raised my voice, they refused to see any of my children anymore. So lesson learned, always stay calm and just move on. That's what I got out of that. But then I think I had to call 20 different dentists to find someone, and actually didn't get anywhere over the phone, but a friend of my son from school recommended someone, and that's who my kids see now, and she's fantastic. So I do agree with use the resources that you've got. For me, it's people at school or other doctors, or even Facebook groups of people that can recommend that they've had a good experience in the area, because those are the ones that are looking for similar things. And yeah, Denise, I'm sorry you had that. For us, she does just come right on time. And as far as the Medicaid, we qualified to have a nurse in the house, and I just, for that reason, I was having a hard time having someone be in the house that especially because I have semi-young children, they're teens and tweens now, but I didn't ask for help because I didn't want that outside influence over the years. So what I've done now is I'm still waiting for it's been months and months and months, but waiting to get finalized to get paid myself. And now I'm farming out other responsibilities. So I have someone come and do some laundry, and I have someone come and she's actually also good with my son, so she will feed him sometimes. But trying to learn how to, okay, if somebody else isn't going to be good caring for my son, then I'll do it, and farm out the things that I can, because I went off on a little bit of a tangent there, but
I know what you're describing is the perfect illustration of something that I remind myself and others all the time. There's help for your caree and there's help for yourself. And if there's not help for your caree and you're doing it all, what's the help for yourself that allows your life to be easier? That's bottom line. And I think oftentimes we think, okay, I'm the only one that can help, so I'll be the only one that helps, without thinking through, well, what's the help for me?
because there's a peace of mind in that too, right? Like, I didn't go away with my husband alone for a decade. We didn't go away from our kids for 10 years, and then I had 3 people come to the house, mostly because I knew I wouldn't have a good time. How am I going to relax if I'm worried about my son having a seizure, or my other children? I knew I wouldn't enjoy myself. And when we finally did go away, it was 2021. We had been through a pandemic with 3 kids home, and I was going to I had to fly out of my building, my house, because I couldn't be here any longer. But we had 3 people come and stay with the kids for one night, and they FaceTimed me while they gave him the medicine, while they gave him this, because they were nervous about it. So, which is fine, and we made it work. But it took me 10 years, and now I'm able to do more. So my husband and I don't go away alone, but we will trade off, and I will go away either by myself or with a friend or something, and I try to have him do the same, and we find ways to make it work. But it's that mental peace of mind. I know that if I'm gone, that my husband is fine with them, and vice versa. If we were both gone, it makes us nervous and uncomfortable. So we don't love to just disappear. So it's whatever gives you the most peace of mind, so you can fill your bucket and make sure that you're okay. It may not be ideal, and hopefully someday my husband and I will again be able to travel together, but right now that's not the case. So, and that's okay.
And it's not enjoyable. That doesn't, taking a break that doesn't bring joy to your life is a waste of resources, time, and money.
Yeah.
And it jeopardizes too much. And I also think when you are managing complex care, you know how quickly that complex care gets derailed.
Yep.
And if something happens and you have to put it all back together, I mean, that also makes me want to cry thinking about that. That is,
Yes.
if you have a system that works, you're taking care of the system that works, because that gives you a break.
Yes. Yeah, that organized routine, and everybody will say, "Oh, your house is so organized." Yes, because I need it that way in case there's something goes awry, then I know that all of these things are in place, and that gives me peace of mind. And you can call me whatever you want. I'm type A, I'm anal, I'm whatever, I don't care. That gives me peace of mind, and I feel then that I can relax in other ways. I'm the type of person where if I get it done now, then I'm inherently lazy. I want to get it done so that I can then decompress, because I can't decompress if I know I'm worrying about things. So, oh, I get things done. Well, no, actually, I really just want to lie down.
Actually, one of the life skills I did learn from caregiving was to just do it. In the moment when you can do it, just do it.
Yeah.
So it solved any procrastination inclinations that I had, because I thought if I procrastinate, I'll never have this moment back. And I have a moment, I'm going to do it now, because I don't know what the next moment is going to bring. It was really helpful.
And then your brain is wasting time thinking about
Yes.
it. So
Yes.
it's that, unless you offload it onto a list somewhere.
Barbara, how about for you in terms of managing breaks and figuring out how you take breaks so that it actually feels like a break?
I mean, in terms of much like Jaclyn, everything kind of came to a screaming halt with COVID. And both my parents, my sister, my husband has asthma, so they're the vulnerable population. So for a very long time, and even beyond, when everybody else was taking masks off and getting back to normal, we're still cautious and we were still careful. So we've kind of learned to I mean, for myself, I've kind of built a break like into my normal routine. I set up, when I get home from helping with my sister, when I come home, I'm done. I'm sitting on the couch, I'm watching TV with my husband, I'm decompressing for the evening. I kind of build the self-care, if you will, kind of into everything already. Because in many respects, a vacation, just stepping away on a vacation.
I think Barbara froze on us.
I did.
Okay.
There we go.
Okay. So tell us again. So you were just about to say your perspective on taking a vacation.
Oh, honestly, it feels like more work. There are so many.
Right. Yes.
And
It's a lot of
I
work.
look at it and I'm like, what can we do to be more, recuperative right where we are?
Yes. Yes.
Because we've taken family vacations where we take my sister, and it's great, but I come back home to recuperate because I'm exhausted. So
Here's a question for both of you, and Jaclyn, we'll start with you. I'm curious what you think a successful doctor's office and staff does to be successful for you.
Not spend a lot of time on little nuances, I think, just getting right to it, because we see so many doctors that I just want to cut right. Why am I here? Let's get this done. How many times do I have to see the same doctor for them to go? I understand that it's necessary to go through all the little details, but I guess some of the e-check-in things are probably make it a little bit easier, because then I can go down the list and say, just go through it ahead of time instead of wasting time in the office. So that stuff. I also get frustrated when they only talk to me and don't acknowledge my son. So that's a big pet peeve of mine. I always want them to acknowledge him and talk to him and treat him with respect. And obviously nobody likes wait times in the waiting room and things like that. So being on time, the faster we're just in and out and get what we need to done for why we're there, and respecting that my son sees 10 specialists a year and I respect your time and I'm going to just streamline this and cut to the chase. This is why we're here. This is what we can do. Don't beat around the bush. Don't just, these are our options. This is what's happening. These are our options, and then being straightforward about it. Also, I love when doctors are available through a portal because I don't always remember everything. Of course, I try to write down my questions before I get there, but something will crop up after. Or if my son is sick or has an issue and I can write in the portal and cut down a visit, just get an answer that way, send a picture of something, or just ask a simple question. Do you really need to see him for this? Then that just streamlines his care so that I'm not spending all of this time stressing. It just, I have an answer and I can now move on.
Yeah, I love that insight about just give it to me, right? Just speak straight, just speak honestly, because I don't like to be managed, right? And so if it's not straightforward, it feels like you're being managed, and that's, uncomfortable. I also think it's kind of disrespectful. Look where I am in my life. Look what I've been doing. Just tell me. Just
And
tell
of
me.
course, that varies depending on where somebody is in the process, right? When my son was really little, I was much more emotional about everything, and it was very hard to hear those initial diagnoses. But I did notice when my son was first born that they also didn't know how to be straightforward and they were uncomfortable with the disability community. A lot of doctors were. So I remember when my son was 10 months old and I took him to see the neurologist that had seen him in the NICU. And I thought, okay, I knew she lived in my town. Her kids went to school in town. We had a conversation about it in the hospital. She didn't seem to remember me at all. She said to me, oh, do you think no one has told you he has cerebral palsy? Oh yeah, he has cerebral palsy. But it was the way she said it was very curt. I did not understand anything about cerebral palsy at the time. So it was, there were, I think that there's this discomfort in the medical community with disability. And there's a whole disability community out there that is supportive and inclusive. And I don't know why none of them seem to connect with one another. So the medical professionals seem, in my experience, seem to just be like removed from it. And even when I would go to the hospital and say, oh, my son has disabilities. Oh, I'm so sorry. Well, that is who he is. And it's not something to be sorry about. There just seems to be this discomfort there and a lot of dancing around it. And she could have said, yeah, your son has cerebral palsy. He's gonna need support. He's gonna need care. His personality is gonna emerge and he'll do whatever, he's totally dependent, but he's smart, fun kid and he's sassy. And I feel like they also could provide the resources that I found on my own. There was none of that. Finding his school, finding even the therapists, early intervention, the programs that he has, all of the things that I write about. There is just no even, I think they handed me a script for early intervention and then they wash their hands of it. Okay, you move on. So there's just no overlap or understanding in that, which I understand they have a lot going on, but it would have just been nice to have somebody guide me to give me an idea of what's out there, because I really did just find most of it on my own.
And that's the goal with these new services. We hope that commercial payers start using the billing codes and start using the services, because the doctor could have just simply referred you. Wouldn't it have been great to refer you to someone with a similar life experience who is 20 years out, has completed training and said, okay, let's figure this out for you. And even when you introduce your son and say he has disabilities, wouldn't it be great if someone said, okay, tell me more so I can make this interaction successful for all of us. Tell me
Yes.
more so I know what to do to be helpful.
How does he respond? What will make him comfortable?
Or
Or just
yes,
talk to him and give
yes.
it a minute. Have the patience to give it a minute, because we're all so quick with the social interactions, or we wait, 3 seconds? If I stop talking for 3 seconds, I would make you uncomfortable, right? So we have this timed frame of What makes someone uncomfortable, he won't respond within 3 seconds. He needs time to assess you. He can't run away. He can't, it's a little slower for him. So there's just not enough out there where I could talk for days about that. The disability community is so segregated, and if it was more integrated, then people would learn and be more comfortable with that world, and not feel so, I'm sorry. Like, okay, my son's 12 now. You really, how many years are you gonna say this to me? Like, this is old news. This is where we're at now. So I think it depends on where somebody is. So I guess we were going back to how they can respond. In the beginning, it would have been nice to have had a little bit more support, but positive support, not just, oh, I'm so sorry for you. So it kind of, read the room a little bit and maybe see where the person is at. But I don't know how feasible that is with what resources they have available. I really, which is why, anyway, this is why I write, and I would love to speak at medical conferences and speak about that bedside manner, because it really did significantly impact me, where I hate going to the doctor for myself now. I will have a panic attack when I go for an ultrasound for anything, because it just makes me so, it brings it all back and makes me nervous.
Yeah, well, I have to have a follow-up conversation about this because it's huge. And I really believe that there are simple things that we could do to make it better for everybody, including the clinician.
Yeah.
Barbara, what would you add?
Well, I guess I kind of stand in awe that listening to what Jaclyn's saying, my mother dealt with this 48 years, the same issues 48 years ago when my sister was born. So it's kind of very sad and yet kind of sickening to me that we're still dealing with these issues, all after all this time. I would say, to her point as well, when with say my sister specifically, when someone comes in, we actually have like the dentist we found. Oh my God, I shouted their name from the rooftops because they did walk in and they tout themselves as the only organization in our area that has the most experience working with folks with developmental disabilities. And the fact that they came in and they listened to us as the family, she's nonverbal. And it's like, not that they tune us out at all. They ask, okay, like you said, Jaclyn, you tell me, does she understand this? How do I communicate with her? That's huge. We don't want your pity. I don't want the, oh, I'm so sorry. But to your point, I don't think people know how to sit in discomfort. That's uncomfortable. If they're not around disabilities, they don't necessarily know what to do. My husband's an amputee. We still have people who will like look at his leg out of the side of their eye like that. And he's like, he's comfortable with it. He's like, just look at it, people just don't know what the right thing to do is. I think they struggle with that. They don't want to offend, and yet they end up offending without even trying, I personally would love it in our world if our doctor's office even looked at the e-check-in information, because I spend 20 minutes doing it and then they're like, oh, well, we don't get to see that. So that's a frustration. I'm like, well, then why do you send me this stuff? There is a lot of automated things that they want you to do, but yet you get paperwork when you walk in, or they ask you for the same paperwork every time. And my husband's always like, did you not read the last stuff I gave you? What's with all the homework, And to Jaclyn's point, I absolutely love all of our doctors are on a portal, and it's outstanding. I can just fire off a question. I don't have to leave a message and maybe hope somebody returns my call. I know it gets there. I think those are, it's kind of tying in technology to a bit. The televisits are outstanding. We choose those as well. I'd rather do that than a 45-minute drive one way, So yeah, I resonate a lot with so much with what Jaclyn said on many levels, but yeah.
This was great. Thank you guys so much, Jaclyn and Barbara, for sharing and for offering your insights and your wisdom. This was really helpful. And I'd love for you guys to share contact information in the chat room. Please feel free to share website, social media, email, whatever it is that works for you. And I want to thank everyone who's joined us live. Hold on for 1 minute, because I'll share more information about CEUs before we close for today. And for those who are watching the archive, thank you so much for watching. We hope you found this conversation helpful. And just a reminder, we keep our archives of our learning opportunities on our community, caringourway.com. Thanks, everyone.